Big ideas for small houses. The most important thing that I want to say, that overarching all of the ideas I'm going to show you, is that none of these ideas, and no ideas that should be applied to a project, should ever be for their own sake. All of the ideas you'll see are for the purpose of making something work. The most important notion about design is that it works. I've come across, to my huge frustration, many times, lots of instances where people have said, well, it's beautifully designed, but it doesn't work very well. For me, that is a catastrophic disaster. If it doesn't work very well, it's not beautifully designed because it's rubbish. The most important fundamental to good design is that it should work. That it should work is the most important thing and should be a given. Everything we do about making things look great has to underpin the sense that it works. So, kicking off, I've created 10 tips, if you like, to give you good ideas for making the most of a small house or a small space. And we've got to start somewhere, so I'm going to start with extending and converting. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. The vast majority of customers who come to Architect Your Home essentially want more space. And if you've got a small house or a small flat, making the very most of the space you've got, or getting the maximum space you possibly can, is very important. You'll see a lot of the items about maximising, getting the absolute most, wringing every square inch out of the property that you possibly can. One of the most obvious ways to find more space in a property is to extend it or to convert parts of it that aren't working well for you. Very common type of extension is called a side return extension. I've never quite understood why it's called a side return extension, but that seems to be the common usage, so we'll run with it. Here we had the flank wall of what was the kitchen, the garden wall was here where this red wall is, and a new party wall has been built on the boundary, a little glass roof put in, just giving another 1.5 meters of width to that room. But just that extra 1.5 meters has made all the difference to this room. It's now a kitchen, dining, and a little living space, really functional. Just that extra little bit of space has totally transformed what was possible in that room. So there's a good example, a very common example of making an extension to a small house. Another way of finding additional space is by converting the loft. Here's a loft in an old barn that's been converted into bedrooms. You can see the structure has been exposed, and we're using the apex of the roof. We've opened out the structure to create bedrooms in here. So it's not about what style it is, it's not about whether it's contemporary or old-fashioned, it's about finding the space and making it work for you. And these bedrooms work terribly well. But I don't think really this lecture is all about extending and converting. This lecture is about trying to find the best out of the space that you've got. So the next one I'm going to go on to is maximising space, trying to get the maximum out of the space that you've got. And in the vast majority of homes I go into, I'll find opportunities to find more space or to maximise the space. So here's a few examples. Here's an example of a bathroom that's been created, and by stealing the understair cupboard, you can see the staircase using my clever laser pointer here. I can show you there's the underneath the staircase. This area used to be an understair cupboard, and by stealing that space, we've been able to create a spacious bathroom. Now, there are lots of opportunities with understair spaces, corridors, etc. within houses that you can reuse to much greater effect and maximise the space that you've got. This little flat, this is actually a studio flat. This was one room, 6 meters by 4 meters. The only separate room to this was a little tiny bathroom, but everything else had to go on in this room. You can see here the bed and the front door straight off the common parts of the flats come straight in, and the kitchen has been formed in this area. You can see a special shaped kitchen to make space to come through so that it wasn't tight. It's been made especially narrow, and it allows the space to flow and yet fit everything in. Another picture of the same project. You can see this kitchen, it's been made bespoke. At this point, it's 500 millimeters wide, and it narrows right down to about 250 millimeters at this end, which allows the space to run through to the dining table there. Behind the kitchen, behind that worktop, you can see everything's involved. There's even a washing machine, microwave, combination oven, there's a TV up here, sink, and this special hob. The special hob is kind of the hero of this piece because that was specially made for this particular location. Even if I go back one neat little trick was that, which looks like a drawer, pull that drawer out, it's actually a fold-out ironing board. So we were able to get an awful lot of function into a very compact little unit in this project. Moving on, it's not just about maximizing space, it's also maximizing height. Very often, if you can get more height, you can use that height, or at least it can give you a greater sense of space. This project was a basement extension, and you can see here that it's quite narrow. We've got the kitchen in the foreground, a little dining space in the middle, and down at the bottom end is a living area. Now that living area would, under normal circumstances, be a little bit claustrophobic and dark and unpleasant, and yet by removing a section of floor on the ground floor, we were able to pour daylight down from the front windows and make that space feel much more open. The extra height that's given there alleviates the whole thing and turns what would be a sort of quite tight claustrophobic space into something really uplifting and energetic. And yes, there was a small sacrifice of ground floor area, but it was considered well worth it for the benefit it gave to the whole of the basement feeling light and airy and much more usable. This is a quite extravagant project, but here we have some very, very steep-sided roof form. And the structure has been opened out so that rather than just having one living room space, we've taken the structure right up and created this staircase up to create a mezzanine level up higher, but also in doing so created a really, really extravagant, exciting space, really dynamic, that feels really spacious. In terms of square feet, this isn't a particularly large room, but it feels absolutely huge because we absolutely maximised the height. Here again, this was a barn conversion, and in the original house, when we went in there, it had already been converted into a house rather badly. You came in through the front door into quite a low-ceilinged, tight space. What we did is we took that ceiling out, put a bridge in, which links the rooms either side at first floor, but it allowed you to appreciate that height. We put in a spiral staircase, which took you up to that bridge and from there to the bedroom. So the circulation worked terribly, terribly well. Once again, very important that principle is that it works. And then from that, you get a very exciting and very elegant visual solution. Upstairs, this is upstairs on the bridge. There's the top of the, there's the top of the spiral staircase there. And this is the bridge with glass sides that accesses into the bedrooms either side. But the whole thing feels so much greater because we've maximized the height. The other advantage of the bridge is that you get what's called multiple readings of space. You see the space from the ground floor, and once you go upstairs, you're on that landing, you read the space again. The effect is much, much greater. Number 4, maximize the sense of space. Well, we've already touched on this with some of the examples already. Multiple readings of space really enhances the sense of space. Extra height enhances the sense of space. Another thing that's very, very important to enhance the sense of space is visual depth. Here we've got, this is the view as you come into this house from the front door in the hallway. You've got the dining space in the foreground. You see through the dining space into the living room. You see through the dining space into the kitchen. Off to the side here, you also see through the dining space into the study. In each case, you then see beyond the dining, beyond the kitchen, into the garden. these layers of view, these deliberately set up views, really enhance the sense of space within a house. Always think about how you're going to see the house and how you're going to see through it, because that layering and depth creates a very, very wonderful effect, and it creates a much greater sense of space. Here's another example of the same effect. In this house, very, very tight site here. We were restricted, we weren't able to get any windows on the ground floor at all. We were relying on all the light to be coming down from above, from a great big roof light above, which means taking out areas of the first floor in order to allow that light to come down. But also down on the ground floor, you get these layers. We're standing here in the kitchen. You're seeing through the living room space where there's a big open fire, through to the dining room space. As you come in the front door, that wall, which you can see, the dark blue wall, has got a picture opening in it, so you see through that opening into the dining room. Deliberately setting up layers of view through a house that gives you that chance to really get a sense of the size and really get a sense of maximize that sense of space.